Hello there, and welcome to coverage of Grand Prix Portland. I'm Marcel Sutcliffe in the booth with Jacob Van Lunen, and you can see that we've got round two coming up for you here. Omar Valencia versus Dustin Taylor. Four-color Emerge. This deck is weird.
I actually think he's actually playing mono green Great Aurora. I believe. I think those
That's from
haven't
last
gotten
round.
changed.
You
yeah.
are correct. I'm looking at my screen. Mono green Great Aurora Emrakul is how he's described his list here. It looks to cast the Great Aurora, then Emrakul, then on their turn make them discard anything relevant.
That's about the most exciting thing I've heard ever.
Oh, man. I can't wait to see what happens here from Dustin. I love the deck name, by the way. It's perfect. Don't ever change it. So we'll see. On the other side, Omar is playing blue-red, which is also an interesting deck. You know, I played in a couple of leagues this week, Jake, just to get familiar with what Standard looks like post-PT here. And this deck was everywhere. Now, actually, this one looks a little interesting. I don't remember seeing too many Thunderbreak Regions, but there's
I haven't seen much of that card either.
but there are versions of it. Do we have the list here, Jake? Let's take a quick look. Yeah, we do. This
Seems
one
we do.
is from Omar, which actually I don't see here. Well, we'll try to find it.
But
normally this is a Fever Visions deck is what I've been seeing.
Yeah, and Fever Vision's so good right now. Everybody's just trying to play this slow, long game. Everybody's trying to cast these big emerge spells. And you cast the Fever Visions early. They start taking tons of damage. And then you can just empty out your hand because your hand is often just a pile of burn spells.
Yeah.
So when you get above 7, you just empty your hand down to 7, take a chunk out of your opponent's life total. If they play anything to the board, you can, again, just use cards that efficiently deal with it. Something like Lightning Axe, very strong here. And these slower decks have a very tough time dealing with these blue-red strategies. Thunderbreak Region's kind of a big game against the mono-green deck.
Dude, it feels like Thunderbreak Region is just going to run away with this game. I want to see what Dustin does because he's casting an Explosive Vegetation, and next turn, he could really cast some powerful stuff. But Thunderbreak Region, I'm hoping, here, maybe. Let's see. There's a card I'm going to look for now in his list here. Let's see. No, that's not it. Yes, he does have 2 World Breakers. It can help.
That can definitely help.
That'll help. 4 Nissa's Renewal. Yeah, this deck is really cool.
If you have 2 buys and you're looking to check in, please head over to the Chase banner. That's the 12-foot tall banner.
I think we may have one of the names wrong, by the way. I believe that this is Dustin Bailey that we're watching here.
I think you're right.
Because I've got a Chris Taylor that we've also got down in the feature match area. He's at one of our side tables, and maybe we just have a mix-up. And then also, I wonder, don't have Omar's deck list either.
Oh, interesting. Omar, it looks like he's not playing the Fever Visions version of Blue-Red. He's actually playing something much more similar to what Tamaharu Saito was playing toward the end of last Standard season, which is a Blue-Red Flyers deck. And it kind of plays an aggressive draw-go style of game. Here we see Collective Defiance. It's a pretty exciting new card from Eldritch Moon.
Yeah.
But the deck's very strong against green strategies that can't really deal with flyers effectively. I think the deck probably got worse with Ishkan and Graph Widow and the newly founded popularity of Kozilek's return. But seems to do pretty well here against mono green Great Aurora. And
Rocco. That's a tough one, right? The 4/4 flyer there is going to do serious work against us, and he really doesn't have that many answers to it. But looking at his list, it is a little bit more than mono green. He's got the swamps that you saw as well as the wastes. He's also got 3 Hissing Quagmire in his list as well.
So the black, just for those Hissing Quagmires and then access to something like Languish or Virulent Plague out of the board, it seems.
That's correct. Yeah, not in the main deck. All right, here's Chris Taylor versus Ethan Brown on our side table here.
Evolutionary Leap on the battlefield here for this green white token
looks
deck,
like
but he's getting
Spellqueller
run
has
over.
done some work here. 2 spell Quellers have 2 spells under them as far as I can tell. Yeah, it looks like Declaration in Stone and Dromoka's Command got gobbled up.
John Oliver to the main stage, please. John Oliver to the main stage.
And Ethan really going to need to find somebody to clear the board. And I mean, I think the only thing he could really do here is find a card like Tragic Arrogance. And sometimes we see Tragic Arrogance out of these green-white tokens decks, so it wouldn't be completely crazy to see it, but he definitely doesn't have one in his hand, so it's a matter of time before his life total becomes 0 or he's able to find a card like Tragic Arrogance.
Yeah, speaking of, here we go. Dromoka's Command is going to kill one of the spell Quellers, which means that he's going to get to kill the other spell Queller now. And he's going to get back another Dromoka's Command, and this is just a downward spiral for Christopher Taylor. You know, he really had a lot locked up in those spell Quellers, and now that they're unraveling, he's going to lose 3 creatures in this transaction. What a beating.
Yeah,
wow, both spell Quellers
really
down
rough.
and a Duskwatch Recruiter while he's tapped out. Oh, man. Ethan Brown just doing it here. That's nasty.
Yeah, that was a very exciting turn of events. And that's one of the downsides of Spell Quellers, that you really want to be leaning on them with it. You know, you want it to be that last punch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you're using it like aggressively early, then a lot of the time what happens is that your opponent's able to get that card back and use that card again later on, especially if you're using it to get rid of something that only costs 2 or only costs 1. The best is when you Spell Queller or Counterspell.
Because then it's kind of just hung out to dry there.
That's just that.
All right, so here is Reflector Mage now from Chris. Looks like he's gonna try to reset that Sylvan Advocate here. And you know what? Ethan is going to have none of it. He's just going to sacrifice it to Evolutionary Leap, and boom, he hits Avacyn off of it as well. Man, that domino fall from those Spell Quellers was brutal for Chris. He's still fine, but like that was a rough sequence for him.
And even another Spell Queller here. Avacyn conveniently costs 5 mana.
Man, and look at
out
Ethan.
of range.
Yeah, and look at Ethan go off here. So he's blocked with a plant token and now sacrificed that to Evolutionary Leap, where he's hit a Hangerback Walker, which he can then cast.
Sacrifice.
And then you can see the loop here. How in the world is Chris Taylor going to get out of this? You know, he needs his own copy of Dromoka's Command pronto. He's got to find one to get rid of that Evolutionary Leap, but the damage may already be done from Ethan's side anyway. I mean, his hand is like Gideon, Avacyn, Hangerback Walker, plus another card. Looks like he's just going to run out Avacyn in the main here and sacrifice a plant as well.
Yeah,
he wants to trigger his own Avacyn.
Good.
He found a replacement Avacyn as well. Now he's going to pass a turn. He's going to trigger Avacyn on upkeep and force Chris to do something. And Chris says, yeah, I guess it happens. Kiss your board goodbye. Drop down to 17. What a savage. Man, we came at just the right time to see Ethan kind of enact his plan here. I mean, Chris was way ahead when we came in, or at least significantly, and now Ethan has completely turned the tables on him. Great stuff.
Yeah, I was when we first tuned in, I didn't know what Ethan could really do, and then the chain of events, you know, we got to see what cards were underneath those Spell Quellers, and
all right,
they fell like dominoes.
Let's let Ethan Brown finish this one up and head back to our main match, which is just getting back underway. We don't want to miss anything from over here. Between Omar Valencia on blue-red and Dustin Bailey. We've got Omar's deck list here, and it was, as you said, you know, he's playing Dimensional Infiltrator, Rattle Chains. Like these two cards tend to, you see them together quite a bit, and then we've got Icefall Regent and Thunderbreak Regent. Whoa, I have not seen Icefall Regent in a while. Blue-red Dragons, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, he is playing Dragons. I think it's more Flyers than anything, because he does play Rattle Chains.
Draconic Roar? Blue-red Dragons?
Yeah, you're right. He is playing Draconic Roar.
I don't know. I like it.
He has a couple copies.
Hey, here's Fevered Visions, by the way.
There it is. He does have cards in his deck that are not very good cards if he does not draw Fevered Visions. Like, he's playing 2 copies of Unsubstantiate. And there's a card that, incredible when you have, especially when you have multiple copies of Fever Visions in play. The mana efficiency, the fact that you can, pay 1 mana and really punish somebody who's trying to get it off the board with something big like Crotch of Tentacles or Greater Roar or something of that sort. But if you're not using something like Fever Visions, Unsubstantiate is not really what you want to be doing constructed.
So Fevered Visions is going to trigger on end step there from Dustin Bailey. And Dustin does not have to discard. It looks like he's at the full 7. And Omar, well, he's facing down a lot of lands, which doesn't look like much, except for it can, lead to some pretty scary things. But this matchup from Dustin's side just feels like a nightmare, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, everything's in the air. I think there are some
looking
things
at
he could
board,
do.
I mean, looking at the sideboard here, there's 3 Summary Dismissal, 2 Negate, 2 Dispel in the board that he can bring in. Like, when you're the one who's trying to spend, 3 or 4 ramp spells to make one huge effect like the Great Aurora go over the top of a mid-range deck, and they're just like, yeah, negate it. It's like, oh, no.
It's just disastrous. Summary Dismissal's so good against so many of the cards in the current standard format. I mean, here, once Dustin gets to 7, he's really, really banking on the fact that he's going to be able to use a card like World Breaker to get back into this game. And if Omar has access to Summary Dismissal, not only will World Breaker get countered itself, but it won't even destroy something.
Dustin Bailey's up to 6 mana now. But there's that Thunderbreak region just taking huge chunks of his life total out. He's going to drop to 12, and answering that card is very difficult. It's very, very difficult. And he's not long for this world if he gets to keep attacking him. So tough spot here for Dustin.
Omar with some options here. Instead of choosing to, use a card like Draconic Roar on the Hedron Crawler, if I'm him and I have Summary Dismissal in hand, I just want to pass the turn here.
Yeah, that's what he's done as well.
And he has Icefall region in hand. He understands that his opponent's about to have access to 7, and this World Breaker, ooh.
He's going to negate Mrs. Renewal here. Seems like a fine place to put a negate, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, that's great.
It's two turns off the clock and all that, so he's really starting to cinch down here. He knows that next turn he can just attack him again, and if he wants, just pass a turn with that Summary Dismissal up, and any huge haymaker that Dustin tries to play, he can counter, and then he's got Dustin down to 1 turn open, And that's assuming that Omar doesn't find some more burn spells to finish him off or whatever. All right, he has a Draconic Roar and a Dragon out. Ouch.
Yeah. And these Fever Visions triggers are still stacking up.
Yeah, Dustin's just going to be almost any burn spell. Does he have Collective Defiance?
That's it.
He answered that question for me, didn't he? What a terrible matchup. Look at that. There's 3 copies of the Great Aurora in hand for poor Dustin Bailey. And he just has to laugh. And this matchup seems miserable to me.
It's about as bad as it gets.
Yeah. Blue-red Fevered Burn. I like Omar's take on this deck. He's added a couple of dragons and the Draconic Roar to pile on extra damage. They're still good cards, right? Like, just because we haven't seen Thunderbreak region in a while doesn't mean that it's bad. It just didn't really have a home. And, well, he found a home for it here and was able to leverage it quite nicely.
I actually really like his take on the deck. I mean, you get to play cards that do things. And you don't lean so heavily on the Fever Visions with his version. Like he can win games without Fever Visions, as we saw with that Thunderbreak region, just carrying the torch.
And, I have been thinking about this Fever Visions deck, having some chats about it with you, with Reed. The version that we've been seeing does feel very Fever Vision centric, like the draws where you don't have it. The deck looks way worse, and when you do, it looks kind of like, wow, you're like, whoa, this deck actually just amazing. So I like that he's hedged away from it a little bit and brought it more towards the middle, where if your Fever Visions doesn't resolve or doesn't stick on the battlefield, you're not just like, well, my deck doesn't do anything now. I'm playing a bunch of, Storm Chaser mages or whatever.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think it seems like it could be a new direction for that deck.
Of course, the downside of it is that it does leave you more vulnerable to interaction. But
that's true.
I like the fact that, like, when you play a card like Thunderbreak Regent, like, Yeah, fine. Grasp it all you want. Take 3. Like, this is a burn deck. Like, it adds up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of incidental damage there that I think works very nicely with Fevered Visions. Like Draconic Roar, killing a creature, slowing down your opponent's clock while also taking a chunk out of their life total, very strong. Thunderbreak Regent, forcing your opponent to use a turn and a card to get this off the table because it's going to kill them otherwise. And then when they do that, again, little chunk taken out of their life total. And you just do that enough times while you're also just pinging them with random things, and suddenly the Collective Defiance in your hand is a lethal card.
Yeah. Yep. Now,
Seems really strong.
The downside to it, though, you noted earlier in the match there, is, popularity of certain cards. Ishkanah Graf Widow is the one that jumps to mind. Mainly, we did see that he happened to face an opponent with World Breakers, which have fallen out of favor, but, still a good card in Standard and still a card that you may see pop up again. Those type of cards do make Thunderbreak Regent look worse, and I think that those were part of the reason why we stopped seeing as many of them. So it is interesting to say, like, if he hits the metagame just right and people are kind of off of Ishkanah, then I think the card looks quite good in a deck like that. But if everybody's playing Ishkanah, you're going to play all these Delirium decks all the time, trading it for a 1/2 Reach Spider and them not taking the damage,
Yeah, not very exciting.
the old double block, it doesn't look great there. So we shall see.
Worth noting, though, that against those decks, Fevered Visions is one of the best things you can be doing against the Ishkanah decks.
Totally.
So, his deck does have a very reasonable plan against Black Ring Delirium.
Indeed.
So these guys still just in game 2. Game 1, we saw Ethan Brown kind of use Evolutionary Leap to great effect in this match. He's able to flip an Avacyn. He probably generated 4 or 5 cards just in the time we were watching with it. Pretty incredible. When that card is working well, it does so much.
Indeed. I think these guys have the 2 sleeves that are like the absolute closest while still being slightly different that I've ever seen.
Yeah. Chris's sleeves have a bit more texture.
A little more texture. Ethan's slightly brighter. We got the hard-hitting commentary here while we wait for players to finish shuffling. Good turnout here in Portland, by the way. We'll get you numbers a little later. We can't give them to you quite yet because they have to tally them up after we've got a round under our belt. But I can tell you that this is a packed house, a lot of smiling faces, a few frowning faces, probably because round 1, round 2 is, coming to an end. But another great turnout on a beautiful day in Portland.
Some interesting stuff happening yesterday.
What did you see yesterday?
The trials. Lots of blue-red Fevered Visions decks. Quite a few human decks, actually. And
interesting.
There's a deck that showed up in single-digit numbers at the Pro Tour. And I think if anything surprised me about the Pro Tour metagame, it was how few aggressive human strategies showed up. The deck is very fast. It has the ability to go underneath some of these other strategies. Repel the Abominable is a card people can play to beat these cards like Kozilek's Return. And in a metagame where I imagine we're going to see less and less copies of Languish and more copies of cards like Radiant Flames and or Kozilek's Return, I think that it could be pretty well positioned.
Now, I also, by the way, for people that watch a lot of streams here, at the GP circuit and the Pro Tour, this is Ethan Brown. It's that Ethan Brown. He's 13 years old, and he's a GP finalist. This kid was heartbreakingly close to winning Grand Prix LA. I mean, he was we thought he had it, and his draw kind of fell apart on him. But he played great. He played in his first Pro Tour. That was Eldritch Moon, just a week ago in Australia, in Sydney. He said it was a great experience for him, an amazing experience. He didn't manage to make it out of day 1 for his first PT, but that happens. There's a lot going on a Pro Tour.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's also a Wild West format when you don't have, a support system to, give you an effective deck, and the pressure of playing against the best players in the entire world.
Yeah.
Those things add up.
I love this kid. I was a little worried about him after GPLA just because he was so close to winning. And when you're 13 years old, that's a lot of emotion, a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. And, he's on the cameras and it's like a bunch of people around. And I didn't know how, I don't know him personally, so I wasn't sure I would handle it. And we went over and chatted with him, and just hey, how you feeling, everybody? He was like, great. He's like, I made the finals of a GP. Like, he was just stoked. He got to go to the Pro Tour, and like, that's an attitude that can be elusive, for people that are competing at that high level like he is. And I was really impressed by his composure for that. All right, so it looks like we've got Eldrazi Displacer here for Chris Taylor, who also started things off with a Thalia. Let's see if Ethan can crack back here and find a way.
Displacer, another card we've seen a lot less of recently.
Looks like he's going to leverage that declaration in stone here to get rid of the Displacer and pile in for a couple of damage and pass the turn. So not a super exciting turn there from Ethan. But got rid of a key piece of the puzzle potentially for Chris. And even got in for some damage, so it wasn't terrible.
This pacifist, not really doing much just yet.
No, it's really not. Thalia stays home for Chris. And you can see the green-white tokens deck. It has fallen out of favor in Standard, but it still has a lot of powerful plays.
Yeah, those are some pretty strong cards. Nissa and Gideon.
Totally.
Alongside all of this token production.
Right. And, you can see now that all of a sudden that Lambholt Pacifist is feeling a little feisty. That pacifism thing, that's done. And it's going to get in the red zone now that it's at 4 power. And that's also going to unlock the attack there of everything here. So Chris Taylor's going to fall down to 11, and even though Ethan has missed a couple of land drops, he's still able to develop a really impressive board and keep some heat on Chris Taylor.
It's like selective vegetarianism. You're around your friends, they're all having hamburgers. Let's do this.
All right, there's a declaration in stone now for Chris Taylor to take down the Sylvan Advocate and maybe clear some attacks now? Nothing like that. He's going to just take down Nissa here, right?
I would assume so.
Looks like he's deciding where and how he'd like to attack. So he's going to say, all right, Thalia's going to hit you. Excuse me, Thalia's going to hit Nissa, and this Tireless Tracker is going to hit you because I'm going to actually just crack a clue now and get in for 4. And then Chris is just going to pass the turn back after that. So this is a close one. This is getting interesting now. Chris Taylor should be ahead here. He's the one who, has managed to hit his land drops for the most part. And he was ahead early, but Ethan has fought back and tried to keep the board relatively evened up. But he really needs to hit that last land if he's going to keep doing it.
And one of the bigger problems here, too, is that...
he found another Oath of Nissa. This is going to help him find that land, but it also means that basically his turn's used up. Wow, he whiffed on a land, too.
And even when he finds another land, it may come into play tapped here.
Totally. Look at his lands right now. All 3 non-basic. Oh, he had one. Okay. Well, it didn't matter anyway. He wasn't going to do anything else this turn, so he's just going to pass it back. So Ethan Brown kind of clinging to this Lambholt Pacifist now, but it's doing a noble job.
Yeah, I mean, it's 4/4 is a very nice size here when you're facing down Thalia. And, even Tireless Tracker. But now, Chris Taylor, he just has, the world at his disposal, especially with the second copy here.
Totally.
And he's just going to start drawing tons and tons of
He's
cards.
going to play a land, make 2 clues. Yikes. Yeah, this is where things start to really turn around if you're Chris. Now, this storm has been mounting on the horizon for a while now, and now it feels like it's really going to start raining down on Ethan Brown because it's just going to be very tough for him to come back from this. Even if he's able to mitigate this board state, like all these clues are just going to, add up for Chris in such a huge way. So I think this one's going to be over pretty quickly. Ethan really just struggled a little bit to stay evened up with Chris Taylor and missed a land drop or two, and now he's just got so much work to do.
Now, if we're thinking about ways in which Ethan could get back into this game, I think what he would really want to do is find something like Hanger Backwalker that could kind of, create some type of board presence where he could chump block, survive for a few turns, and then use a card like Tragic Arrogance, where he could whittle down the board.
He's got 3 in the main deck, Jake.
I think, it's not completely unreasonable for Ethan to win the game at this point. He also has, for the first time this game, access to 4 mana.
Yeah, 5 even now.
And what's scary, though, is that he's passing the turn for this Collected Company.
Yeah.
And Chris Taylor has not played a single copy of Spellqueller yet.
Oh, no.
I don't know if he has one in hand, but... Huh? Ethan just taking the damage here.
Ethan just taking it on the chin. Ouch. What is it, Avacyn that he's got? It is, but she can't block, and he doesn't have any other creatures, so he just waits to end step it. He's down to 3, though, facing 2 lethal threats. This is a very fragile position here for Ethan. Man, Thalia looks so good here, just like when you're just slightly behind. I mean, he's way behind now, but, does such a good job at making it so difficult for you to come back because your creature's all into the battlefield tapped.
In a racing situation, it's just an ideal card.
Yeah, real backbreaker here.
So the first strike is surprisingly relevant in this format. It comes up a lot.
It does. It does. So Ethan's going to do the right thing here, chip down. Chris Taylor's going to fall to 7, and he's just got to pass the turn back, and you got to wonder, what can he have here? Well, there's a Spell Queller that's just going to get run out on end step. He's not going to wait for Ethan to cast anything. No greed here from Chris Taylor. He just wants to assemble multiple lethal threats if he can. Oh, here's the Lumbering Falls that he's got hidden down there as well. And
it's another 3-power creature.
How in the heck is Ethan going to get out of this? And the answer is he's not. So we're going to get a game 3.
It's kind of a classic standard matchup here, green-white tokens against Bant Humans. Bant Humans, kind of the evolution of the Bant Company decks toward the end of last season. We saw a lot of the best Japanese players in the world, people like Yuya Watanabe, bringing Bant Humans to U.S. Grand Prix. So, willing to fly across an ocean to play with this deck. At the Pro Tour, I don't think it showed up in that huge of a capacity. I mean, it was definitely there. It was present. But it wasn't a deck that you necessarily saw as much of as one might have expected to. It is another Bant Company deck, but this deck could be well positioned. It attacks very fast. It is one of the most explosive decks in the format. I think that using Collected Company and in conjunction with both Reflector Mage and Thalia's Lieutenant, it gives you the ability to tempo people out like no other deck has access to.
See some sideboard changes happening here for Taylor. It looks like Ethan's ready to go.
On Magic Online this week, I saw a few Bant Human decks that were playing Tamiyo Field Researcher. Kind of exciting card to show up in Standard.
Yeah, we saw Tamiyo have some spotlight moments at the Pro Tour last weekend. Specifically, there was a moment with Luis Scott Vargas. He even said, Tamiyo would be pretty good here. Hello. That was a very exciting match. One of the many very exciting matches at the Pro Tour, by the way. If you missed any of it, I would definitely suggest finding it. You can find the matches on YouTube or the replay right here on twitch.tv/magic. And God, this last PT of the season, man, it's
there's
emotional.
So much drama.
It's stressful. It's just people have so much on the line for next year, and
it's great
pro point stuff, and the top 8 at this one happened to be incredible.
Yeah, it was one of the best. I feel like every Pro Tour these days, we're saying, look at this top 8, just incredible, over and over and over. After round 3, after the last round of day 1 drafting, I was sitting at my computer, holding the baby, waiting with bated breath to see what kind of decks people were going to be playing. It didn't disappoint.
What did the baby think?
She was into it.
She dug it?
I think she liked Ishkana. We have a spider problem in my house. She's like, oh, friend.
She's got good taste. All right, looks like players are just about ready. Let's see who's going to win this one. Ethan Brown's going to go for a mulligan here, though he is going to be on the play this game, which has to benefit him. We've seen some of these the curve out potential from these decks is incredible, right? I mean, that's sort of one of the things that green-white tokens banked on, was going like Advocate. I mean, ideally, right? Like Advocate into Nissa into Gideon. That's one of those starts that's just very, very difficult to mess with.
Green-white tokens actually mulligans pretty well in comparison to most of the standard metagame also. And the deck is only 2 colors, doesn't lose games there as often, and a lot of the time, 2 or 3 cards can be the game for a green-white tokens deck. I mean, you lead threat into a planeswalker, and all you need to do is draw a card off the top of your deck to back it up, and you can steal games that way.
Yeah. Definitely seen that. Okay, here's the 6 for Ethan Brown. Which he's decided to keep. Let's see what he's got on turn 2. Something great. He's going to reveal a plains to his opponent, and sure, Lamhole Pacifist. That's nice.
It's a good start.
It already puts the pressure on your opponent to do something now. Unfortunately for him, Chris Taylor with Banned Humans will often be able to do that. He's got a fairly low curve. But there's a lot of decks, that like, they're looking at a removal spell or something. They're like, I guess I just have to grapple right now. Or, it just kind of forces the issue, which, while doesn't make Lamhole Pacifist a dominant card, it's a nice bonus.
I'm pretty impressed with the card consistently. Every time I've played with it, played against it, it always seems to perform pretty well.
I just really like it with Dromoka's Command. That's the thing that pushes it over for me, is that getting that counter on the front end of it and being able to attack. Like right now, if Ethan goes, if he went Forest, Dromoka's Command, kill your thing, attack you. Like that's, ouch, right? It's a big turn. As it stands, he's not going to do that. He's going to play Declaration and Stone just to get rid of the Advocate now, which is kind of interesting. The Advocate wasn't doing much at the moment.
I mean, he may have just had no other way to efficiently use his mana. And, he already has a line for the following turns. If he has a 4, then he's definitely playing it next turn. Oh, okay. Well, this is a good draw step.
Hey, there's that Dromoka's Command I just mentioned a turn ago. Thanks, Ethan. Great assist there. And bang, he's going to take down the Duskwatch Recruiter before it even gets to get activated and rumble in there for 4 damage. So Taylor with a clue, but this is how you can punish them, right? Like, you use a Declaration in Stone, and you're like, okay, I'm going to give you a clue, but if you start whacking them for 4 damage a turn, it's like, hey, you want to take half of your mana for the turn to crack this clue, by all means do so, but it's going to cost you.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really like about Declaration in Stone is that
oof. Well, Chris is, sorry to interrupt, Chris has just presented a compelling counter argument to what we were just talking about with liking the pacifist and the whole interaction. He's just immediately put it right back in hand. Oh no, does Ethan only have 1 green mana source right now? It does look like that. So he can only cast 1 card. In this case, he decides on the Sylvan Advocate, assuming he might hit a land next turn, and it'll be able to attack for 4. Awkward draw the last couple of games there from Ethan. He stumbled a bit on mana, and Chris kind of ran him over with those tireless trackers and the value that generated with them. By the way, here goes Sylvan Advocate. And it's felt like Chris has been one step ahead of Ethan for, basically since we've come over to the match.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a favorite, I believe. I think one of the reasons that Bant Humans became so popular at the end of last season was because it had a strong matchup against Green White Tokens. That's my understanding. And Declaration in Stone, it's a card that is much better in aggressive decks than it is in controlling decks, because if your opponent doesn't really have time to sacrifice those clues like we talked about, then it's just an incredible removal spell. But here the problem is that, like you said, Chris's deck, very low to the ground, lots of inexpensive cards. He's going to have plenty of time to sacrifice those clues if he ever runs out of gas.
Totally. And he's, in fact, already sacrificed one of them, and we've now hit that mid-stage of the game where, to be honest, Declaration in Stone just looks mediocre at this point. Like, it's taking out a card that costs 2 mana or something, maybe 3 mana, depending on what he hits with it. In this case, he took out a Reflector Mage. That thing already kind of wrecked him, and now he's going to get rid of it, but he's going to get the card back right here. There it is. That was the Reflector Mage going back into hand there, and Ethan's just down a card in the transaction, and we've hit this mid to late stage of the game, so, this does happen at this point, but pretty rough for Ethan.
Hey, Ethan, though, still applying some pressure here, Chris. Down to 12.
Yeah, you take a snapshot, and Ethan looks like he's in decent shape, and then you look at Chris's hand.
Oh, yeah.
He had 5 cards in hand. He's got a Tireless Tracker now with still 4 cards. Man, if Ethan could answer the Tireless Tracker, I think he might be in decent shape. He's still going to need to draw some stuff, but if that Tireless Tracker just gets to sit there and do its thing, oh no, here comes Collected Company from Taylor. Ethan knew that this was a possibility, didn't feel like he had a choice, and just decided to attack. Let's see what Chris hits. 1 Reflector Mage, and I think it's about all she wrote for Ethan. Whoop.
Yep.
Well, I didn't mean literally just 1 Reflector Mage, but that is exactly what happened. And now Chris is, again, pulling further and further ahead. Ethan does not have an answer for the Tireless Tracker. He cannot replay his creature. And onward we move in the direction of Chris Taylor probably winning this match.
Yeah, another Tireless Tracker here. Ooh.
Oh, God, an Evolving Wilds? Oh, my God.
It's a lot of cards and a lot of damage. You can sacrifice a pair of clues and...
Yeah, 2 cards in hand for Ethan, and, there's some things, this is exactly what Chris needs to think about, but he's decided, you know what, I'm going to just start rumbling. I know one of your cards. I returned it to your hand. It's a Lambholt Pacifist. So if you've got a Company or a, Avacyn, then I'm just going to have to suck it up here, and he does. So that worked out pretty well for Ethan. He just gets to gobble up one of the Tireless Trackers, which is pretty nice. Huh. Weird. So Chris did not sacrifice his Evolving Wilds, though, before his Tireless Tracker died?
He did not.
Maybe a misstep there from Chris. I can't imagine why that would matter in any other way.
It's pretty surprising, I think.
Yeah.
That,
getting an additional clue can be the difference. Now, in this game, it does feel like he's far enough ahead that it probably won't matter, but no, he's at 8. He's facing down Archangel Avacyn. If he's completely out of gas here, I think Ethan wins this race. So
it's
maybe.
only 2 turns.
Yeah.
And he's in the air.
We'll see. That could come back to bite Chris. It really could. Little stuff, these cards in Standard are incredibly powerful. Archangel Avacyn, just ate a Tireless Tracker and is now threatening to kill Chris in 2 turns. You can't give your opponent any wiggle room. Spell Queller in hand for Taylor means that, again, it feels like it's just going to be very tough for Ethan to actually kill him. The Spell Queller can counter something or even just chump block. The Archangel Avacyn. Is he actually going to animate that Lumbering Falls? It's 5/5.
That would surprise me.
It's 5/5. He can do it. All right. Do it. Get in. Oh, yeah. Chris is...
I like that.
He's ready to go. Yeah, he's ready to trade some creatures off and get in there. And Ethan's kind of forcing the issue here and saying, all right, well, you're going to sacrifice a clue then. Sure.
Put him down to 6 here.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, Chris is going to lose his Reflector Mage here. And he's going to go to 5. And he did not find a land to cast the the Spell Queller. And he's just going to die in the air to that Avacyn?
Wow.
Did that just happen?
That did just happen. Ethan Brown just stealing that game. Stealing that game so hard. I mean, he had nothing. His opponent had like a pile of clues. Like his opponent was like playing Jenga with clues on the other side of the table. They're like...
oh my God. Yeah. Well, that attack did not work out well for Chris Taylor at the end there. As Avacyn turning into Avacyn, the Purifier plus the 3 damage was enough for lethal. And it felt like Chris had that one locked up if he just sat back.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't have to do that. But, I mean, Avacyn, very powerful card. A lot of the time, your opponent makes that misstep. And it puts you in really awkward situations where, you know, you feel the pressure. You're like, I should be winning this game. I should be winning this game now. But instead, you know, you got to wait.
Wow,
because
incredible stuff.
You go for it.
The only
thing's
thing,
going to flip over. And
the only thing I can think of is that it, and I know it sounds weird, but I think it may have slipped Chris's mind about the transform. Like, I think he thought, all right, I'll take 4. You know, like, I can survive that. It's fine. But he didn't realize, no, you're actually taking 9 total. Like, the transform does 3 to you, too. And, of course, makes you into
a 6-power guy.
6 power, so super savage. All right, so let's jump over and see. Oh, we've got Chris VanMeter. CVM here playing against Kerry Edwards.
Distended Mindbender there, Chris's side of the table. Archangel Avacyn, again. So far, these feature matches we've watched, Archangel Avacyn has been a force to be reckoned with. What about this card?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because there's this natural cycle. I think it's just a human thing that you kind of get used to these cards, right? Like, remember when you first saw Archangel Avacyn and you were like, oh my God, like, you know, how did they print this?
What
and then,
is going on?
Yeah, and then like people started playing it in standard and it was like, wow, like this card it's, you know, it warps the format. It's like a card you always have to consider. It makes a whole class of cards worse. Removal, like most mass removal, most spot removal looks bad, you know, and all of a sudden everything kind of changed around it. Now we're kind of used to it. You know, it's been out for a while, and it's like, yeah, Avacyn, I know. Have you seen Emrakul? Right? You know, we kind of have this natural tendency to do that, but that card is every bit as powerful as it was. You know, even though people have adjusted to it, and it's, you know, there's more Grasp of Darkness effects and that kind of stuff, it's still just a wrecking ball of a Magic card.
I mean, there are more Grasp of Darkness, but there are also a lot less World Breakers, which was another card that people started, you know, using quite a bit of as a result of Avacyn's popularity. Again, Avacyn doing a ton of work over here.
I like seeing a Distended Mindbender here from Chris VanMeter.
That's a card that I think is quite good this weekend.
This weekend specifically, you like it?
Yeah, I think that it's good against these other slower Emrakul decks. I think that you know, going into the Pro Tour, these green-black Delirium decks, they really weren't prepared for the top end that they were going to face. And playing a mid-range deck when your opponents can go that big is very dangerous. But Distended Mindbender, you know, it lets you win those matchups. Playing that alongside a few copies of Eternal Rest of the Mind, you know, don't really need to lean on a card like Infinite Obliteration as much as you might need to otherwise.
There's an ultimate price taking down the Tireless Tracker, by the way, from Chris VanMeter. So it's short-lived, but he does get a clue. In the meantime, Kerry looks like he's content to just keep building out 2-2s. He doesn't have a whole lot else to do from what I can see here. You can see a lone spider left there for your daughter. She's she's going to miss Ishkana, but the little spider friend is still hanging out. In the meantime,
that's a little spider. That's the spider we let stay in the house. Ishkana, stay in the backyard, baby.
Here's Distended Mindbender. Keeps on pressuring Gideon here, and just basically forcing this loop where Kerry just keeps blocking with the Knight tokens, and Chris is looking for some way to kind of get to Gideon. Chris is at 9 and has to be careful. Ooh, there's a Liliana. The last hope, though.
Wow.
And that's really interesting here because he can use it as a card advantage, which it looks like he's going to do. He's got a Den Protector in his graveyard, or he's also got a Tireless Tracker. He's going to go for the Den Protector here, though now he's in that slightly awkward position where he's only got the 4 mana, so if he runs it out, it could be vulnerable, though it's felt like his opponent's kind of out of gas. We'll see if he decides to just run it out there or not. But anyway, he's going to use Liliana as a card advantage engine to keep going. He also has the ability to use Liliana, had he chosen, to start just plussing and making it so that it's difficult for Kerry to pressure Liliana, and that ultimate is very real. We saw that at the Pro Tour multiple times.
It's a lot of zombies.
Yeah, we used up all our zombie tokens pretty quick at the PT. It looks like Chris has decided instead, though, to go ahead and just keep the Den Protector in his hand.
And he can still use that mana to sacrifice his clue. It's not like it's just completely going to waste. And the Den Protector's value when he's flipping it up is so huge here.
Yeah. I mean, look at his graveyard. Another Distended Mindbender. He's got
another Liliana.
Another Liliana. He's got a Ruinous Path that he can get back just to kill Gideon and just say, enough with this, dance. I'm just going to kill.
Yeah, and he has enough to awaken also with that Ruinous Path, which, if you've seen that work effectively, that oftentimes can, kill a big creature, then make a 4/4, which can just attack that Gideon and get it off the table all at once.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised. Kerry's decided to force Chris to do that line. Basically, he could have attacked with Gideon, not made a 2/2 if he wanted, and encourage Chris to chump block with a spider, knowing that his Gideon may just die anyway to a Ruinous Path, but he decided against it. He says, no, if you're going to Ruinous Path it, you're going to have to go through the motions here. You're going to have to play your Den Protector. You're going to have to transform it, or you're going to have to unmegamorph it or whatever, and then you're going to have to use that mana as well. So
now this 0/1 Knight here.
Yeah. More like a Squire's assistant at this point.
Not quite so exciting.
No.
Liliana's a card that really has changed the standard format quite a bit also.
Ooh, there's a nice one, though, from Kerry. He's found Ob Nixilis. What
That
direction
is
is Ob Nixilis going? Is he just going to take out the Distended Mindbender here? That would be probably the most straightforward play. But, Kerry has other options. He's also got 2 cards in his hand. Well, he's going to take out the only, I'm going to put this in air quotes, unblockable threat here on VanMeter's side. He's going to take out the Den Protector. Chris isn't going to be too sad about that. He still gets to get the value out of it. But, Kerry is really trying to fight to keep his Planeswalkers alive, and by making this play, it means that Knight token still gets to chump block something where the on the other side of the coin, he would have just lost his Ob Nixilis.
From Kerry's perspective, he had Duress in hand, so I think what he was hoping for is, okay, Chris is going to flip up this Den Protector and get Ruinous Path, at which point I can then use this Duress in my hand to get that Ruinous Path out of his hand, and then I've got him down to nothing. Unfortunately for him, Chris's hand was Grasp of Darkness,
and he's also got a Blighted Fen here that he can use if he wants to just clear away all blockers, which looks like what he's going to do.
Seems pretty good.
Ouch. So he's going to have to settle for just bringing Ob Nixilis down to 1 loyalty here rather than kill both Planeswalkers, which is what he would have vastly preferred. But he does get to tick up Liliana. He's obviously way ahead on board, and he's just got this 1 Ob Nixilis to deal with. So this is a huge turn for Kerry. Well, he's going to make him get rid of Ishkana by using a Transgress the Mind. And while that's handy, he'll be happy to not have to deal with Ishkana. I think he really wanted something a little more potent than that to affect the board this turn. Because now he's very likely to lose Ob Nixilis here without a great removal spell. Distended Mindbender just does such a good job of dodging just the right type of removal spells. Can't
It's
be
a really
grasped.
powerful card.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it can't be grasped. Can't be ultimate priced. Oh no, another Den Protector now from Chris VanMeter, and he's just going off here. He's going to start attacking Kerry because he knows he can kill him next turn at this point, so he's just going to ruin his path Ob Nixilis and just rumble here. Kerry's going to drop to 3, and he's dead.
Yeah, that's going to be it.
Well, that
Not
might have
quite.
been it. So that was either that our life bar is incorrect and that was the match going to VanMeter, or it was the ultra rare Game 2 handshake. Let's find out here. We've got it now updated to
Ooh.
1 and 1. Are players going to sideboards or to match slips? Ah, okay. So they had actually run into the clock, is what happened.
Oh,
there.
so that explains the handshake.
That was what the handshake was about, was that they were anticipating and then taking a draw because they couldn't finish the game, even going to extra turns, which is apparently where we are at here. So that's going to do it for round 2 here from Portland.